Welcome to Flash Tracks Woodworking. In today's episode, we'll be making the final copy of this wooden camping sign. This particular set that you see now is a trial version made out of some scrap pallet boards, but we're making the final version out of some good cedar boards, which will be more weather resistant. The issue with the cedar, however, is it's open grain and the paint tends to run along the fibers and sometimes spoil the good crisp lettering that we want. So I've been experimenting with this board and some techniques that I've looked at on other YouTube videos and also some ideas of my own to keep good crisp painted letters on our final board. To do that, I'll be using some Oramask to mask off the lettering. I'll be using some sanding sealer to seal the edges down inside the pockets in order to keep the paint from wicking along there. And then also a spiral downcut bit, which I found will form good sharp edges at the corners without causing the mask to kind of fuzz up a bit and give us some issues when we're trying to paint. Also be using the CNC machine pictured behind me to get generally good formed letters to start with. So with that, let's have a look at the steps we need to accomplish this project.
The first order of business is to get some perfectly straight and true edges on the boards that I'm going to edge glue. I don't own a joiner, so I'll be using my sled in order to get the edges that I need. I'll take my two true edges, apply some wood glue, and clamp them up so that I have a board that's wide enough for the top portion of the camping sign. With the glue dry and the clamps removed, we'll begin our preparation steps by sanding with 220 grit sandpaper, then wiping off the dust with a towel and some tack cloth, and then applying some sanding sealer. These are fairly important steps that are needed to get good crisp black painted letters on our sign, so I'll be summarizing them later in the video and also putting them in the description. While the sanding sealer is drying, we'll be using some Oramask to cut out some pieces to cover the board so that the paint will only rest down inside the pockets that we're going to make with the CNC machine. Since the Oramask is somewhat expensive, about $1 a square foot, I'm only going to cut enough mask to cover the areas where the pocketed letters are going to be. I want to make sure that I'm burnishing out all of the air pockets and also ensuring that I have intimate contact everywhere between the Oramask and the cedar surface. Here's a drawing for the smaller board that we're going to add the city and state and also the cutout for the state of Ohio. So if we bring in those elements, the text that we're going to put in, Cortland, Ohio, the Ohio map, and then also the cutout boundary. I've already got toolpaths set up for those. The pocketed parts, the city and state, as well as the pocketed state outline are filled in there, and then the cutout will be done there. If we render those, see the bit moving around there, and then we kind of rotate it. And this will be our first CNC machining operation to get the lower part of the sign. Now we'll head over to the CNC, power it up, clamp down the board, perform the zeroing, and then cut pockets for the city and state lettering and the state outline. I'll be using a 1/8 inch diameter spiral downcut end mill. The downcut will give us sharp corners and reduce splintering. I'll be moving at 30 inches per minute with a pass of 80 thousandths deep. To complete the cutout operation, I'll swap in a 3/16 inch end mill, 0, then proceed with the operation. The end mill will be passing around the perimeter of the board at 50 inches per minute. It will make 7 passes at approximately 1/8 of an inch deep in order to make its way fully through the board and release it. It will be leaving some tabs so that the sign won't separate from the outside piece and rattle around, and then we'll remove those tabs afterwards. Here, I'm taking the board off of the bed of the CNC, bringing it out to a flat surface, flipping it over, and then using a hammer and a chisel just to break through those tabs from the back side. Next, I'll walk the board over to the vise and remove the tab remnants with a flat file. Since I cut it a little too close, being frugal with the Oramask, I'm going to add a little bit of painter's tape to make sure when I'm painting down inside the letters, I don't overrun onto the cedar background. You may recall that we applied sanding sealer to the board early on, but that was before we cut through the mask with the router bit. So now we've exposed essentially end grain down inside the pockets where the paint can wick up along the fibers of the board. So we're going to apply sanding sealer again and make sure we tuck it into the sides of the pockets to try to prevent that paint from wicking along the grain underneath of the mask and spoiling our nice crisp letters. Because we're applying the sanding sealer down in the pockets, it can tend to puddle a little bit down in there, so at the end of the sealing operation, I'll use a cloth just to remove the excess inside of the pockets. Now, hopefully, we've limited the paint to only appear down inside of the pockets. We've limited it vertically using the mask, and we've limited horizontal wicking with that last coat of sanding sealer. Now it's time for the big reveal. We've let the paint set for an hour and a half or 2 hours. It's dry to the touch, but maybe not fully cured yet. It's time to remove the mask. This can either be the most satisfying part of the operation or the most frustrating if we didn't do it right. If it works, it's kind of like when you get your new phone and you peel that plastic off the front. Ah, what a feeling. So let's pull the mask off and see what we have left below. In this case, spoiler alert, it's a pretty good result. You will notice near the end of the operation, you need to use some sort of pick, or in this case a razor blade, to remove the insides of the letters that have a surrounding border. But no big deal. The mask comes off pretty well, and we're left, as I said, with a pretty pleasing result. Having had good success with the smaller portion of the sign, we'll move on now to the larger part of the sign. While the sanding sealer is drying, I'll go to the drawing program and create tool paths for the upper portion of the sign. Since we've already discussed all of the steps for the small portion, I'll move through them more quickly here and then summarize them near the end and down in the description. So here we go for the main top portion of the sign. In succession, we will mask and burnish, clamp the workpiece, pocket the lettering and decoration, park the router to reveal the pocketed result, file the tabs, apply sanding sealer, then paint down in the recesses. Now that the paint has had a couple hours to dry, it's time to peel the mask. I find it's best to peel the mask the same day it's applied, so you may want to start these kinds of projects earlier in the morning. I'll peel as much as I can by hand and then use a snap-off utility knife to pull the pieces out of the centers of the letters. With the pocketing, painting, and cutouts completed, we'll use a 1/8 inch roundover bit to soften up the corners on all sides of both signs. The only surfaces of the signs that do not have sanding sealer on them now are the edges of the signs. I'll set up my drying rack, and then I'll put sanding sealer all around the outside edges, as well as on places where I've repaired blemishes with some sanding in order to make sure I have sanding sealer on all surfaces to be ready for the final polyurethane top coat. I'll be using the same technique I used on that small trowel piece of cedar, using this Minwax one-coat polyurethane. It's water-based, easy cleanup, also a little more clear than the oil-based versions. I know it's going to be a little tricky with the polyurethane tending to gather down in the pockets. I experienced this on the test piece, but once it dried, the results seemed to be pretty good, so I'm just going to repeat that process here on the two signs. Near the end of the top coat operation, I'll use the bristles of the brush to try to clean out any excess polyurethane down in the pockets. I'll use a dry, clean piece of paper towel to clean off the bristles as I remove that excess polyurethane. Here are the list of steps I promised for the surface preparation, the masking, the pocketing, the sealing, the painting, and the top coating. I'll also include them in the description with even more detail.
The polyurethane is dry. I've used a few of these simple screw eyes and also a few links of this black chain in order to connect the top portion of the sign with the name and the welcome with the bottom portion of the sign that has the city and the state. So the sign is ready to be hung by the client. Happy anniversary, Hartmans. One of the features of this sign, it's a little unusual, is it's double-sided. Symmetric, can be read from either side. So the sign can either be front-facing or hung more in a mailbox type of arrangement to be read from either side. So that pretty much completes the woodworking project. Like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. See the description down below to get more details on the exact procedure that I used if you want to try to duplicate it. Leave me a comment or a question, and then check out the videos that will pop up here on your right side for more related types of project. As always, thanks for watching Flash Tracks Woodworking. We'll see you again next time.